The CEO stood, walked to the door, and locked it. The girl in soaked rags didn't flinch, but the room felt like it stopped breathing. Then he said, "Sit. Walk me through this. What happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning." The rain didn't just cling to Lena Morgan's coat. It seeped into her bones, cold and unforgiving, as if the city itself was testing her resolve one final time. She had no umbrella. Her hair, once neatly tied, now clung to her face in wet strands. But she didn't wipe it away. She didn't fidget. She sat, unmoving, on the edge of the expensive leather couch in the marble-floored lobby of Hawthorne Dynamics, as if any wrong motion might shatter the fragile reality that she'd made it this far. Around her, the glass and chrome palace of a building exhaled quiet judgment. Everyone else in the room wore suits that cost more than what Lena's family had lived on for months. Polished shoes, silk ties, matte leather briefcases. Each person emanated the sterile confidence of someone who'd never had to pawn their phone just to pay for a bus ticket. In that silence, every soggy inch of Lena's being became a protest. She wasn't like them, and she knew it. But she also knew she didn't come to apologize. The folder in her lap, bent at the corners, water-spotted, was more than a resume. It was her weapon. Inside, each page told a story not of where she'd been, but what she could see. She had spent months dissecting Hawthorne Dynamics from a public terminal at the library, downloading white papers, sketching systems maps on receipt paper, tracing patterns in how their public support failed their clients. What others treated as abstract strategy, Lena understood through necessity. When you spend every day deciding between bus fare and baby formula, inefficiency isn't theory, it's survival. She wasn't intimidated by the space. She was focused, hyper-aware. She counted the seconds between each receptionist's glance, noted how many applicants the elevator carried up every 15 minutes, and clocked which name was called first, twice. Patterns. Always patterns. Lena's hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from the exhaustion of running on instant coffee, hope, and nothing else. Still, her spine stayed straight. Her gaze didn't drop. If this company prided itself on intelligence, innovation, and insight, then she was the most qualified person in that room, because no one had more reason to see what others missed. No one had more to lose. And when the receptionist finally said, "Miss Morgan, you're next," the room paused for a beat. Every head turned, every eye waited for her to retreat. But Lena stood, and she walked. Darren Wolfe didn't waste time. He was the kind of man who judged you in the first 3 seconds, and Lena's soaked sleeves and secondhand boots had already spoken volumes. His office was minimalist, sterile, intentionally designed to intimidate. Glass walls, cold steel, a silent corner sculpture shaped like a DNA strand. It wasn't art, it was a declaration. Only the evolved survive here. "You're here for the executive assistant position?" His voice wasn't skeptical. It was surgical. Lena's "yes, sir" landed softly but didn't tremble. Not once. Darren had seen confidence before. It came wrapped in Ivy League polish. Firm handshakes, perfectly timed jokes about mergers and stock buybacks. But what he saw in Lena wasn't confidence. It was resolve. Something raw, something stubborn, something that didn't belong. "Resume?" She opened the water-wrinkled folder. He saw it before she could stop it. Several hand-drawn diagrams, arrows looping between labeled boxes, handwritten notations like bottleneck here, root cause, live queue priority mismatch. His brow furrowed. "These yours?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes. I noticed some flaws in your escalation workflow from the public data." Her voice was dry, sandpaper scraping against fear. I think you're losing customers who never get past Tier 1 support. Darren didn't answer. He stared at the sketches, tracing a line from intake form to automated trigger failure. The air shifted. The room didn't move, but something within it did, like gears catching. He didn't say a word, just stood, moved to the door, and locked it. The sharp click of the deadbolt sliced through the silence like a blade. Lena's heart thumped, not from danger, but from the unknown. She kept her eyes forward. If this was a test, she would not blink. Darren turned back to face her. The way he looked now wasn't casual. It wasn't predatory. It was clinical. The way a scientist looks at a data point that shouldn't exist. He sat, picked up the wrinkled paper, ran his thumb over the ink smudged from rain. No one spoke. The room felt like it was holding its breath. So was Lena. Because in this moment, stripped of credentials, appearance, polish, her only defense was the sharpness of her mind. And the question now hovering in Darren Wolf's silence wasn't whether she was qualified. It was whether the girl in rags had just outthought his entire executive team. Lena didn't move. The click of the lock still echoed in her ears, and Darren Wolf's command, "Sit," hung heavy in the sterile air like an unopened verdict. She sat, spine straight, palms pressed against the folder on her lap as if bracing herself for impact. Darren returned to his desk with the diagrams in hand, but not like a man reviewing an applicant's doodles. He laid them out carefully, aligning the edges, scanning each flowchart with sharp, precise eyes. The silence was surgical, dissecting her without anesthesia. "Walk me through it," he said, without tone. Not polite, not hostile, simply demanding truth. Lena inhaled slowly, willing herself to be more than what she looked like. She pointed to the first chart, a simplified map of Hawthorne's digital support intake funnel. "This is your front-end ticketing system," she said, her voice firm but quiet. "Right now, it routes all high-priority tickets through the same AI filter as low-priority ones. That's where your drop-offs spike." Darren said nothing. She continued, flipping to the second diagram, hand-sketched with color-coded arrows and overlapping circles. "This is where you're bleeding time and reputation. Customers who request escalation are pinged back to basic support bots. They drop, complain on public threads. Your brand perception dips, but if you reroute based on behavioral flagging, say rapid back-to-back queries, you can reduce churn by at least 15%. He leaned in, still silent, but he was reading now, not judging. Lena paused only to check if he was with her. He was, eyes locked, not a flicker of doubt, not a twitch of impatience. She finished with a hand-drawn chart titled Projected Retention Recovery and scribbled beneath it in pen. Estimated savings, 6.3 m/year. When she looked up, Darren was standing again. At the window this time, one hand on his jaw, the other in his pocket. The skyline behind him was overcast and blurred with rain. But his mind, in that moment, was anything but. "Why are you really here?" he asked, voice low. Lena hesitated. Then she answered without flinching. "My mom's waiting on a kidney transplant. My brother's 16. I didn't come here to beg. I came to prove I can give them a better life by giving you results." Darren nodded once. No smile, no praise. He turned, picked up his phone and dialed. "Get me legal," he said. "Now." And somewhere between that word and the silence that followed, the world shifted, not for Lena, for everyone else. The backlash was immediate and deafening. By 8:03 a.m., a wave of internal messages hit Hawthorne Dynamics' upper management Slack channels like a storm front. One thread read, Is this a joke? No vetting? No clearance? Another, less restrained. Who the hell is Lena Morgan? But the headline on the company portal didn't flinch. CEO appoints unknown applicant as special strategy consultant. Skips. Entire hiring panel. For an organization built on procedure, it was heresy. For Darren Wolf, it was precision. He faced the board that morning not with defensiveness, but with indifference. His answer, just 12 words, sliced through every protest. She earned that spot more than anyone in this building. No graphs, no justifications, no slides, just truth. Behind him, Lena stood motionless. She wore a borrowed navy blazer that hung awkwardly at the shoulders, a pair of slacks too long at the ankles. She didn't speak, she didn't smile. But her presence, measured, silent, impossible to ignore, was louder than any of the execs trying to discredit her. They called it reckless. They whispered about optics, reputation, setting a precedent. But then came the data. Lena's customer retention model, implemented in just 10 weeks, had closed hemorrhaging support loops, rebuilt ticket escalation flows, and flagged hidden churn behaviors that even the CTO's own analytics suite had missed. The internal report was a spreadsheet soaked in red ink turned suddenly black. $6.7 million saved. Customer satisfaction up 23%. Brand favorability restored across 2 major platforms. Even the most vocal critic in the boardroom, Chief Strategy Officer Harold Vance, quieted when the finance team confirmed the numbers. She hadn't just justified her presence. She'd rewritten the standard. And then came the conference. The company's year-end gala was typically a glittering show of power, reserved for executives, investors, and keynote speakers in $1,000 suits. This year, they handed the mic to a 22-year-old girl who once sat shivering in a lobby with rain dripping from her cuffs. Lena stepped onto the stage. No teleprompter, no notes. Just the truth etched behind her eyes. "I used to think hunger was weakness," she said, her voice calm, clear. "Turns out it was fuel." The room stood before the applause began, not because they were told to, but because they had to. There was no denying it now. The girl in rags had become the company's backbone and its future.